Good day, pre-service teachers. This is Chiden Love O. Perez, and I am going to discuss about visual impairment and hearing impairment. But before that, we're going to unlock first if what is a visual impairment. So when we say visual impairment, it is also known as vision impairment. It is a term used to describe any kind of non-correctable vision loss, whether it is a complete blindness, a very low vision to not being able to see. While the hearing impairment or hearing loss, this is a partial or total inability to hear. Hearing impairment occurs when there's a problem with or damage to one or more parts of the ear. So now let's move on as we are going to learn on how to identify, how to handle, and how to motivate learners with visual impairment and hearing impairment. To identify learners with visual impairment, you need to consider the following: constant eye rubbing or eye redness, extreme light sensitivity, squinting, closing one eye or misaligned eyes like their eyes moved quickly from side to side or wander randomly. Then also the poor focusing or trouble following objects. This is where their eyes don't follow your face or an object, or he doesn't seem to make an eye-to-eye contact. Then inability to see objects at a distance. That's why there is what we call a near and far-sighted. Either they hold things up close or far to their face. Then inability to read a whiteboard, blackboard, etc., or trouble reading. Then, to identify learners with hearing impairment, we also need to consider the following, like speech problems. This is when your child says words incorrectly. Inattentive. This is when a child not answering your calls or not responding to things you have said. Then higher volume. If your child hires the volume on the television, radio, or computer too high, this could be a sound of hearing loss. Then not following directions. If a child seems confused by directions, brings the wrong item, responds in a way that makes no sense, or consistently asks for things to be repeated, he or she could have childhood hearing loss. Next is learning difficulties. This is when your child is not paying attention to their teachers. Social withdrawal. Oftentimes, children with hearing loss avoid social situations like sports, parties, and family events. Let's move on how to handle learners with visual impairment in mainstreamed classes. So first, we need to consider the seating accommodations to help them see you or whiteboards, blackboards, overhead displays, etc. Then we also need to consider to wear glasses, use magnifiers, or use extra lighting for classwork. Require large printed handout materials or audiobooks for reading. This is to be clear and dark for them to read easily. Then need voice-activated computers or other assistive technology. Then need someone to assist in taking notes. So we must consider if they have their assistants in taking down notes. Then need extra time to get to classes or complete assigned work. So allow more time to complete tasks and provide breaks for them to cope up with everything. Also need to go to school nurse for medication or assistance with visual concerns. So now let's move on how to handle learners with hearing impairment in mainstreamed classes. So first, we need to find ways to communicate more effectively with the child. So don't talk while you're turned away from students because the student will understand much more of what you say if he or she can see your face while talking. Next is reduce background noise as much as possible. So close the classroom door whenever feasible so that noises from the hallway are diminished. Then, consider hearing assistance technology. So we also need to consider if they have their hearing assistance aid. Also, use captions. All students benefit from captions and especially those who are deaf. Then use visual stimulus. Students who have a hearing impairment require visual cues or support in their learning to assist their understanding of the content. Now, we are going to move on how to motivate learners with visual impairment and hearing impairment. So in motivating children in the classroom, it is very important key in teachings. It is important to remember that deaf and blind children have been constantly reminded of their handicap throughout their life. So, students with visual impairments should be encouraged to participate in all classroom activities like physical education and extracurricular activities. Then, we need to make sure our classroom is easy to move around and free of obstacles. Also, students with visual impairments may feel self-conscious about their condition, so we need to cheer them up. Then, visual impairments can be wide-ranging, so we need to consider each student's needs individually. Then, to motivate learners with hearing impairment, we also need to be aware of our students' history. We need to be constantly improving their self-esteem. We also want to set realistic goals for our kids by not making them too high nor too low. The last point made is to treat all students equally by giving each one equal responsibility. Together, all of these things will create a motivated child. And remember that each child is an individual and each technique needs to be adjusted properly as one sees fit. That would be all, and thank you for listening.